What about this idea, since we're on the subject of sound? This is brand new. I'm going to float this out there. It's going to revolutionize. I'm revolutionizing the worship pastor world right now with this statement. I got an idea. What if at the beginning of every service you just have some loud feedback event? Because then after that...
then everybody's thankful afterwards.
Yep. After that, it doesn't matter what the volume is at. People are going to be like, thank you, Jesus.
Yep, TM, TM,
That's
TM.
not going to happen.
Trademark that.
Well, hey, listeners, welcome to another episode of Church Chat. Man, I'm so pumped that you're here. These conversations have been absolutely incredible, encouraging, challenging, and I find myself hardly being able to contain myself on the days where we get to record these. I'm just so pumped about today's conversation. The guest, this is a podcast that is all about having conversations about ministry that you wish you were having, that maybe you don't get in all of the fancy places we have conversations about ministry. These are real, hopefully meaningful, and I'm just pumped to be a part of it. My name is Josh. I'm one of your hosts.
And I'm Emily, and today we get to interview another Southerner turned Northerner. He's a girl dad. He used to rock longer hair. And he has way too many guitars, I'm guessing, because of what his job is. Ryan Bailey, welcome to the show.
We know he has too many guitars because one of Ryan's
coworkers
ratted him out to us today and said, hey, what you need to know about. But you know what? That's true about all
musicians,
really serious musicians.
I have less of them than I used to.
Ooh. What was the top number that you've had at one time?
I don't know, because I'm not sure what the number is now.
I
would have to do the math, but I probably have 4 or 5 less than I used to.
That's good.
Moving from South Carolina to Maryland, the weather fluctuates so much here that I can only manage to maintain a certain number of instruments,
a certain 100 or two. 100 or two of them. I also know something interesting about you.
Oh boy,
from our mutual friend Steve. You like Tom Petty.
Oh, I love Tom Petty.
Dude,
Tom Petty's on my wall back here. I've got Tom, and I've got the Boss on my wall back here.
We share that together. I'm a huge fan of Tom Petty. So right off the bat, I appreciate that we have similar music tastes.
Absolutely.
And you're also just a phenomenal worship leader at one of my favorite churches in the region, Mountain View Community Church. I love listening to you guys when you put some production stuff together and record. It's just great, man.
Thanks,
love
man.
having you here.
Yeah, and we get to talk about just all the worship and production side of ministry. So I reached out to our worship guy at our church. Before he came on staff, I think I didn't realize how much went into that whole side of ministry. And I asked Ben, our guy, to just give me some questions. What would he want to know from a worship and production guy? So he is Ben Hayes. Thank you for these questions. But
so you totally cheated.
I did.
Emily.
I 100% cheated. But
that was 100% cheating.
I know, cheater, pumpkin eater.
It makes me question your integrity when it comes to the little game we play to intro guests.
Which I totally forgot about. Oh, it's been a long day, guys. Okay, so
you ruined the segue by saying you forgot about
completely ruined it. So, Ryan, tell us your 2 truths and a lie. That's how we intro our guests every time.
All right. This is hard because I don't feel like I'm that interesting. So, number 1, my first car was a 1970 red Volkswagen Beetle. Number 2, I can't stand the taste of coffee. And number 3, my 3-year-old and I walked over 300 miles together last year.
3-year-old, 300. This is tough, and let me tell you why this is tough. One, because I haven't met. That's not true. My worship guy doesn't like coffee, but you have. There's some stereotypes around worship guys, especially stylish.
Yep, hip.
Guys,
the hip guys.
My man here is pretty stylish. you got like I feel like you fit into that. I want to press my own coffee. You carry your coffee around in a suitcase when you go on trips.
Hand crank it. Yep.
Yeah, and then you like invite people over to taste what coffee and butter taste like together and stuff. I'm just thinking through this a little bit, but also, man, 3 years old and 300 miles. My brain has trouble with I don't know, Emily, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, unless he's trying to throw us a fast one and he like pushed her in a stroller. But we know people who do high peaks with their children. We're crazy people like that. So
everybody has tried to trick us so far.
I know, which makes me think that maybe.
Well, that's the game, right?
Yeah, the car one, because he was really specific about the color. So maybe it was like a blue one.
But I can picture him driving.
Oh, I can
that.
too. Absolutely.
Like his first car, man. The ladies probably were like,
it's that long hair and the car.
All right, I got to guess. I'm going to go with the car. The car's the
okay,
line.
good. Then I'm going to go with coffee.
What you got?
Is the coffee.
Do you
And
press
now I
your
can
coffee?
switch. And now I can switch back from the water to drinking coffee. on
Trying to
camera.
trick us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you press your own coffee?
No, I'm too lazy for that.
There you go.
And I drink too much of it. I have a pour over in my office.
That's cool. I don't even know what a pour over is. That shows you where I'm at on the.
It's easier to
coffee
clean
scale.
than a French press.
That is true.
Okay.
100% true.
So it's better to have at the office.
Well, now that I've completely outed myself that I didn't come up with these questions, we can move on to the wonderful questions that somebody else created for us. Actually, I did add questions, so have no fear.
I have questions too.
I want to jump in with talking about your role in relation to a lead pastor role, because you guys are the most platformed roles, lead pastor, and he's up preaching and you guys are on stage. Do you have, well, maybe that's not the best question I was going to ask. Do you have a good relationship with your lead pastor, or like, what was that like developing that?
His lead pastor's definitely going to listen to this, by the way.
I'm going to catch up on that. How do you develop that kind of good relationship?
I will start by saying I've been in the situations before where you drive into the parking lot and you see your lead pastor's car in the parking lot and it ruins your day for the rest of the day.
Man.
Just seeing the car there. And that we had a pastors and elders retreat one year, and we were all supposed to go around the circle and say something positive about that we appreciated about the person next to us. And Guy was next to me. Not a Guy, Nebone, our pastor.
Guy, your senior pastor.
It
your
can
lead
get confusing. And that was what I said. When I pull into the parking lot, if his car is already there, my day just moves on like normal. It's and it's such a difference in some of what I've experienced in the past. And so everything that I say is based on the fact that yes, we have what I think is a really good, we don't always see eye to eye on everything, but I think we have a really great relationship. And I think as far as like cultivating it, I think a few of those things is like having respect for the church and the pastor's vision for the church is at the very beginning of that. I think even before maybe like having respect for the pastor, because I think a lot of worship leaders end up in situations. I know I've had friends that they end up in situations where they take a worship leading job at a church because it's there and not because they necessarily believe in the church. And so we were somewhat fortunate when we came to Mountain View that we felt like God was calling us to Maryland from South Carolina. And we were sort of just looking for churches within like a couple hour driving distance from my wife's family. So we kind of it took us a couple of years to find the right fit. And so I think there was a blessing in that, to be able to not end up at a place where I felt like my job was to come in and change a bunch of stuff or I can change a bunch of stuff, but to actually come into a situation where I respect what Mountain View stands for and where we come from. And I can bring my own slant on things and my own perspective onto things, but at the core, like I love our church. And so I think that's the beginning of that piece. And then the next piece is, I think that Guy and I have a really good degree of respect for each other. And, I think that starts with respecting the office. That's biblical. And even having come from places where maybe I could respect the office more than I could respect the actual person. And I don't know if I should really say that or not, but I only knew Guy from like a couple of interviews when I got here. And so I think that relationship started with respecting the office, and the longer I've been here, I've been able to really develop like a really strong respect for him as a man.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good. I feel like that's something that a lot of people that sit in maybe second or third chairs should hear. Like, I don't know if I've ever heard it really said that clearly, that sometimes you got to start with just respecting the office of somebody and allow the space to grow into the relationship a little bit. I got to ask, though, because you can share as much or as little as you're comfortable with. But as a lead pastor, I never want to be in a spot where my worship guy or any of my staff sees my car and is like, oh, I should have worked from home today. So what were the kind of things that made that relationship where you used to work at a place where you did dread when you saw the lead pastor's car there what was missing or off? Yeah.
And I even feel like I should clarify this was a multi-campus church. And I have the utmost respect for the lead pastor of that church.
Okay. Yep.
And the founding pastor of that church. There were some things at campus levels where things became more difficult at times. And so it was really, there was this sense of people being threatened by other people's success that was all sort of clothed in this idea of like biblical honor and respect. And it wasn't necessarily the kind of thing where like you couldn't call the pastor by his first name. You could only call him pastor kind of thing. It wasn't that kind of thing. I think the first weekend that I was at Mountain View that we did communion, we're talking about the service, and Guy asked if I had any thoughts on how we should do communion that week. And I just kind of sat there and I was like, I get to have an opinion?
Oh, man.
Like all of a sudden you had a voice.
It was that kind of thing. It was feeling like I had a voice. There was a time where, it might have been the same time. I don't know. We were doing communion, and Guy suggested a song for communion. And I think it was a song that the previous worship leader had done at some point, and it was written by like a friend of the worship leader. And
oh no.
And so I listened to the song, and I even played it for my wife, and she's like, you can't sing that song. It was just like musically and lyrically, it was just like I couldn't get behind it. It was just like a weird song, and I'm stressing about it, and I'm like breaking into a sweat, and I see Guy in the conference room, and I walk in, I'm like, I gotta talk to you. If you really want me to do it, then I'll do the song, but I can't do the song. And he was like, okay. And it blew my mind, because I had been in situations where it was like, if I tell you to do something, you do it, and you don't question it, and you don't. It was just that kind of like feeling like I had a voice, feeling like we could disagree on things, and it wasn't a challenge to his authority. It wasn't like a disrespect or a lack of honor, but that we just needed to have a conversation.
So what would you say to like a lead pastor like Josh? Of like, how can you work with, so for Josh, how could you work with Scott better and like support him in his role and help him feel like he can make those decisions and have input?
Ask him questions, ask him for input on things that maybe even go beyond, just what songs you're singing on Sunday morning. It's, I still am like, because of previous relationships, it's like I still find myself when like being amazed that I'm invited into conversations that are bigger than just worship stuff sometimes. And then figuring out how each other operates. and allowing each other to operate that way. You know, I know that I'm a person that I don't do incredibly well in situations where everything has to be planned by 4 people in a meeting together. Sometimes I need to get the thoughts from the meeting or the general idea of the request that's being made, and then go back and think about it and mull it over. And, you know, if it's related to songs or something like that, I need time to go and sit with my guitar and think about it and play through stuff, you know, and it kind of goes both ways. Like there, you know, I know there are churches that they plan their worship sets out 2-3 weeks in advance. Guy is tweaking his message up until Thursday or Friday the week of. And so, like, for me, recognizing that that's how he works and being able to put together things based on, okay, I know what scripture he's supposed to be preaching from this week, but I may not get much more from him, or I may, you know, and then we can have that conversation. But yeah, and I think even you know, we have an executive pastor too. You know, he told me one time, we were talking about meetings and stuff like that, and he was like, you know, you don't always have to give a yes or no answer at the moment. And you know, again, not having come from that sort of situation, and so we have an environment where Guy can throw something on the table, and sometimes it's like, okay, I have to go think about that for a while, and we'll come back and talk about it. And he's gracious enough to do that with us. So
that's really good, man. Solid leadership.
And we can make jokes around each other and eat at each other's expense, and, you know, nobody gets their feelings hurt. Like, we, you know, we respect each other tremendously, but we can also, like, poke fun at each other and that kind of thing too, which I think can go a long way.
I feel like that's missing in a lot of church cultures.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate, because if you're not having fun, man, like my dad used to say, you know, when kids were running around the building and breaking stuff or laughing or being disruptive, it'd be like, church should be fun for kids, you know, like let them have fun here. And that's like an undervalued value, I think, in the church world, where we can be too serious, take ourselves to get all hurt, you know, assume. We start assuming the worst pretty fast about people we're in leadership with. And it's just a beautiful thing when your team can have fun together and laugh and not take each other too seriously, like this podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Church chat. So here's the thing I've noticed, and I've talked about, and Emily's worship leader echoed it. I'm sure my worship leader would echo this. I think balance is a really hard thing when you're a leader, especially a leader who is in front of people, often in a very visible setting. I think it's part of that might come from, you know, we have to be on and we have to have everything right. We're shooting for excellence in how we communicate and the music we play. Now, so I want to talk to you and just ask you a little bit about balance. Is it something that you think worship production people struggle with, balancing work and personal life, and have you had to navigate that in your own life?
Yeah, I think some of it can be situational. Some of it can be, you know, expectations that are placed on you. Some of it can be creative people. You know, sometimes you're expected to work like normal people hours, but then your brain doesn't shut off from that. Right. And then you can combine it with, you know, the way some of our brains are function to look at every piece of the puzzle and get stressed out about it. And so, like, for me, it's like I kind of had to learn and train myself if I'm going to be in the office all day, and then on Tuesday night at 9:30, my drummer texts me that they're sick and they can't play that weekend. I don't have to find another drummer before I go to bed that night. I can wait until tomorrow to find that other drummer. And it took me probably 15 years of ministry to be able to get to that point where I could let things go and I could turn some things off. And then I think for like, in a, like, just a real personal level, like, this wouldn't maybe necessarily extrapolate to everybody out there, but there were some like, I hate that COVID happened and has upended so much of life for so many people. But there are some things that I think came out of that I wish could have come without having to go through that, if that makes sense. We used to do a Saturday night service. And so we would, me and my team would get here between like 3:30 and 4 on Saturday, and we'd be here for the whole second half of Saturday and all of Sunday morning. And so for me, even, I would try to take one weekend off a month and have a volunteer lead worship or something like that. But there was, it would always turn out like, okay, we want to take the kids down to DC to the zoo. On my one weekend off that month, it rained, and so it would be like we would plan to take the kids to the zoo for like 4 months before we actually managed to get down there, because I was never home. Like my Saturday ended at like 2:00. And so when we came back from COVID, numbers were a little bit different. We also launched a second campus, and so we didn't bring back that Saturday service, and that literally changed my life. And the lives of my volunteers. I had volunteers that went from playing once a month or twice a quarter to playing twice a month. Even though we went back to doing a rehearsal on Thursday night, it changed their commitment level. Because it wasn't their entire weekend. It was an evening for rehearsal was different than half of their Saturday. And so it gave me back time with my family, so there are things like that. And even just recognizing like some of the stuff that I started doing, getting out and taking my daughter for walks and stuff, how beneficial they were for me, for like my physical health, but for my mental health and my relationship with her, and finding ways to work that stuff into my rhythm, even though we're kind of back to like more of a normal life kind of situation. And then as it relates to like leading other people, is like it's part of my responsibility as a leader not to create expectations that, I mean, they're big boys and girls. They can, if somebody wants to play 4 weekends out of the month, they can tell me that. I'm probably not going to put them on 4 weekends out of the month, because I know how unhealthy that can be. And so even coming back after COVID, like we had 6 months of like every weekend worship was different than what people were used to seeing. And we always kind of went for this kind of like living room kind of vibe, but some weeks it was like a 4 or 5 piece band, and some weeks it was like me with a guitar. And so when we came back and started doing services in person again, I felt like this is our opportunity to capitalize on the fact that people are used to stuff looking a little bit different. And so if we have a weekend where my drummer has to bail, and we've got a couple of drummers that play pretty regularly at our campus. Well, if one of them bails and the other guy just played 3 out of 4 weekends, maybe it's more healthy for us to do an acoustic set than it is for me to have that person play 4 out of 5 weekends that month. And to be able to look out for some of that for them too, because I know how much it matters to me. And this is my job, for them, most of them, it's not their job. They're working a normal job and trying to look after their families, and they're volunteering to come do what I get paid to do. It's important for me to look out for that. And also like I do, I'm like sort of like known for like the shortest rehearsals known to man. Like, let's get in, let's get it done, and let's get home so you can read your kids stories before bedtime and that kind of thing. Because again, I know what matters to me, and so I want to look out for those things with my team as well.
So you're really saying like, man, balance is something that's, I mean, it's probably all of us learned the hard way. It's something that you've had to be intentional about and guard against.
Oh yeah.
Almost not just for yourself, but for your team.
Yeah.
It's something I'm trying to do a little bit better. Like just realizing that when I'm trying to make a call and it's later in the night, even if it feels urgent, that's not really respecting the boundary of a teammate. And I could be interrupting some rest. Just being aware of like setting the expectation that, hey, I want you to take a week off. And if that means that the worship isn't as good this week, that's a fair trade for me. So that's really, really helpful.
And in the long run, that benefits the church better as well. Because if you allow some people who aren't professionals to lead worship from time to time on a regular basis, then if your worship leader goes to Europe with his wife to celebrate their 15th anniversary and then comes back with COVID, the whole world doesn't shut down because somebody else has to lead worship, because you've got people who have been leading worship on a regular basis and growing those skills.
That sounds like it was
For
maybe
the,
a personal experience.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. We escaped it for 2.5 years and we brought it back.
Yeah, it
Europe
happens,
with us.
man. It happens.
So, yeah.
This episode is sponsored by EFCA East, a district of the Evangelical Free Church of America. EFCA East exists to help develop transformational churches among all people by helping leaders live well, lead well, and multiply. We're here to serve you, whether you're in one of the 6 states that make up EFCA East or not. You can find more from us at efcaeast.com. So let's talk about the fact that worship is one of those aspects of church that people have a lot of opinions about. And
no,
oh my gosh, I know. So how do you deal with that when I'm sure you get like people's opinions that you have not solicited all the time of like, I hate that song, or you sounded awful, or like, you know, why aren't we singing this song more often? How do you deal with that? And what's your response?
Oh man. It's hard not to take it personally. I think especially there's the piece of it where, because our ministry role also taps into our creative side, there's a personal something that I think it's different than, you know, somebody that trains greeters or something like that maybe experiences, because it's our creativity is part of our identity, even though I know our identity is in Jesus.
Yeah, but beyond that,
you know, we're not.
Gotcha.
But it's part of who we are. It's for most of us, it's why we ended up doing what we do, and so it's difficult not to take that personally. And then there's also the struggle sometimes of knowing that like my main role is to help people come in and participate, regardless of what they're coming in from, who they are, if they've been a Christian for a year or 6 years or a month, to help all those people come in and worship together. And for some people that means they like it really quiet and reverent, and for some people it means like they're not going to sing until they are absolutely not afraid that the person next to them is going to hear their voice. And those things are always sort of at tension with each other. There are always the people that, like, I always say, like, just because you heard a song on Christian radio doesn't mean it's a worship song. And so you get the, you know, why can't we sing this song? It's like, well, because it's really not a worship song. Like, it's a nice thought, but it's not something that we're going to sing together corporately to God, because it's not even a song that is being sung to God, you know, like.
Yeah.
But I'd say at the same time, like, you don't like disregard people's opinions either. It's easy to sort of jump into the mindset of like, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 20 something years. And, you know, you're a electrician. Like, what are you like? How do you think you can tell me what it should be?
Right.
Here.
No,
I'm like, I mean, not everybody deserves, not deserves the wrong word. How do we validate every complaint that comes in? You know, like, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like a song. There's always going to be somebody who thinks it's too loud, somebody who thinks it's too soft. Like, there's going to be somebody who, one time I had a guy hit up his whole, he was in a pretty big connection group, or I don't know, Sunday school, did a petition in his class to have I'll Fly Away played every Sunday. Every Sunday.
Oh man.
And when I took the piece of paper, he had coerced people into signing, and I said, we're not going to do that, you know. All of a sudden, I'm angry and not listening. And give me like, sometimes I feel like there's a balance here. Maybe, and Ryan, you have permission to like pull me back from the edge here or whatever, but I don't want my worship guy spending an hour talking through that stuff with somebody.
Those have been kind of few and far between.
yeah, I'm not gonna be. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna say sorry. Like, this is why we do it, and the volume level is something that we do in churches. It sounds like Ryan does it. We do it here. You're trying to find the right space where a newcomer who's very uncomfortable singing in front of other people hears their voice and doesn't hear a lot of everybody. They feel safe, and they feel like they can start to express some worship.
Yeah. We've done our homework to make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to do any damage to people. A lot of what people hear as volume isn't always volume. Sometimes it's something that's wrong in the mix, and that comes with having a volunteer-driven ministry, is that
Right.
you don't have a professional behind the console every week.
That bass can get out of hand pretty quick.
And so it's training people to know how to mix better and keeping consistency. People don't notice when stuff is loud if it's consistently at a volume as much as they do
Right.
if 2 weeks in a row you're sort of averaging 96, and then the next week you got somebody that's running at 87. Then people are going to notice the next week that it's back to 96.
What about this idea, since we're on the subject of sound? This is brand new. I'm going to float this out there. It's going to revolutionize. I'm revolutionizing the worship pastor world right now with this statement. I got an idea. What if at the beginning of every service you just have some loud feedback event? Because then after that...
Then everybody's thankful afterwards.
Yep.
After that, it doesn't matter what the volume is at. People are going to be like, thank you, Jesus.
Yep. TM, TM,
That's
TM.
not going to happen.
Trademark that. You got it.
Please don't let that... I'm going to write a book. Ryan, you can co-author.
Oh, gosh. That's amazing.
It'd be one page.
I will say, I think one of the... It's been beneficial, but also sort of sad in a way over the last 2 or 3 years. I think we've been dealing with a little bit less of that, at least as it comes to Sunday mornings. And some of that is because we've strived really hard to create consistency. I think that also the past 2 or 3 years created, or it amplified something in culture in general, where if somebody doesn't like something, they're just going to leave and go find something that they like. And so I think that's maybe... It's made it a little easier on us to deal with some of those issues because maybe we have a few less of them. The people that are here are really, for a larger part, they're here because they love what we do and they want to stay here. But I think it's also a little sad that over the past 2 or 3 years, just culture in general has led people, I think, to dig into their own perspectives and leanings a little bit more, as opposed to learning how to all work together and cooperate together a little bit more.
Yeah.
If that
I agree, man.
is
That
not a
preaches, dude.
terrible thing to say.
No, that's
I
great.
agree 100%.
Kind of on the flip side of people's opinions tearing you down, you are in a role that is very visual. Like, everybody sees you. You're not performing. I don't mean that in a bad way, but like, you are doing something very visible. How do you keep humble, like in a role like that?
My wife and my kids. But no, in all seriousness, there's a lot of truth to that. Like, our families can keep us incredibly humble. Like, my kids only know what I do because it's what I do, but it's all they've ever known me to do. So it's not, I don't think it's as big of a deal for them as it might be for other people who just see that piece, My wife's actually part of our worship team as well. So like, she gets the at home me, and she gets the on stage me. She gets the rehearsal on stage me that's leading the band, and then she gets the on stage me that's leading the congregation. And it's sorely obvious when those three versions of me don't line up. And so I think that can be incredibly humbling at times.
Yeah.
Not only just to keep from getting a big head about, what people may think in terms of the upfront version, but also like for the person that they get at home to hopefully be somewhat similar to that person, just in terms of like my heart and the way that I respond to them, and not preaching one thing on Sunday and just being a complete jerk on Monday through Saturday.
Yeah. Part of what you kind of allude to there is preaching on one thing you're preaching on Sunday, which is something that I don't, it's not like the lead pastor, the teaching pastor is the only shepherd on a Sunday. You have tremendous responsibility. You're shepherding too. You're leading people too. In some ways, in much more challenging and intimately driven kind of ways, because it's worship, it's singing, it's an emotional thing. It's a deep part of us. So maybe you could just talk about, like, how do you think about that? Like, that you're shepherding, how do you shepherd as a lead worship, maybe with your team, but also maybe with the congregation too?
We do some things throughout the year where we do big gatherings where, like, our worship and production teams from both campuses will come together. And we did a Christmas party where we brought in a company that does trivia at, like, bars and breweries and stuff around town, and they came in and did a trivia night for us for Christmas. And,
fun.
That kind of stuff is like just a blast, and people love it. And I think people love it when you do it often enough that they get to look forward to it.
Yeah.
But also, you're not asking so much of people that they just start dreading coming to the event. And, I'm an introvert at heart, and so I tend to connect best on, like, a personal level with people. And so there are times where I'll send everybody on the team a link to, one of the blogs that I wrote or something like that, as just an encouragement. And I'm always trying to send blanket encouragements to people, and, getting better at texting people specific things that they did well on a Sunday or whatever. But also I try to find times before rehearsal, or people who I know have flexible schedules, to grab lunch and coffee and that kind of thing. And I try to be really cautious in terms of, like, the male-female relationships of that. And so we actually have a lady who, she's an older lady that was on our team for 20 years or so, that she's not really serving, like, up front anymore, but part of what she brings to the table is reaching out to chat with and check up on and meet with some of the women on the team. We've got lots of people who are in home groups and Bible studies and that kind of stuff. They don't need as much for us to, I think, give them another Bible study as much as they just need people to check in on them and see how they're doing. I think as far as, like, shepherding the congregation, church is this, like, weird thing where it's the only place in the world where people are expected to walk in and sing rock and roll songs at 9:00 in the morning. And not only that, it's people that, from, like, 3 months old to, like, 103 years old, all in the same room, all from different backgrounds. Some of them are brand new Christians. Some of them are, have been Christians, since they were in diapers, kind of thing. And trying to put together an environment where those people can all come together and participate and worship God together is a challenge sometimes. But I always, like, when I'm thinking through what we're going to sing and what we're going to do, my first step is always to look at the team that I have that weekend, so I kind of know what they can pull off. And then to look at the scripture that Guy or whoever is going to be preaching from, and have everything kind of back up from there. Yeah. To support that, so that hopefully everything that happens on Sunday kind of fits together. And sometimes that means, like, leaving out something really cool and new that we might have been thinking about doing because it's not the right week for it. And then also, I think knowing your church and knowing what's going on in your church. I was thinking about this before we sat down, the situation where, I don't know if you guys know the song God Turn It Around.
Yes.
First couple of times I heard that song, I was kind of like, it's all right. And then I'm a huge Matt Mara fan, and this version came out that had Matt singing on it. And I was like, oh, this song's growing on me. It's like really starting to grow on me. And then all of a sudden we had two, like, really sort of, like, high profile families in our church that both went through some really difficult stuff at the same time. And it was kind of one of those things where if you didn't know one of those families, you probably knew the other family. And so I'm driving down the road and that song comes on and I'm like, this song is for our church right now. And so we introduced the song that weekend, and I introduced the song not talking specifically about those families and their situations, but saying like, I know that there are some families in our church that are going through some real struggles that probably need this song right now. And you guys probably know somebody, if you're not going through something right now, somebody sitting 2 seats down from you probably is. And the cool thing about us singing together and knowing each other is that if we don't need to sing this song over ourselves right now, then we can sing it over somebody who's sitting 2 seats down from us. And that's, when Paul talks about speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, like that's why he says to sing to one another, and our goal is to come together and worship and sing to God, but there's also this great value in doing it corporately with each other and being able to know how those songs, I think, are connecting with our brothers and sisters who are in the seats with us is really powerful. And as a worship leader, it's like we need to know enough about what's going on in our church family to be able to tap into those moments when they come. And I think that was one of those situations where that song may have not been a perfect fit with whatever guy was preaching on that weekend, but it was a perfect fit for our church family at the moment.
Yeah. I heard I was on social media somewhere. Somebody was interviewing a country artist. I can't remember the guy's name. He's big, bearded cowboy. He's, one of these newer, big hit kind of country artists. And they asked him, he must have, I don't know anything about him, must have been a Christian, because the question went to, what do you think is going to be your favorite song to sing in heaven to God or something like that? And he stopped for a second. He was thinking, it was really a question about what do you think God's favorite song to hear would be or something like that. And he paused for a second. He said, I really think that God's favorite song is one the entire congregation sings. Not meaning that everybody in church sings it, but the body of Christ together, all the voices.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't think he's going to care about what I sing. I think I'm just most excited to be one of the voices in the chorus of voices. I think that's such a beautiful picture of what we're actually doing when we worship together. We have churches where we reach a lot of people from the community, maybe people that are de-churched or don't have a church background, haven't really participated in worship like we know worship to be musically. How do you encourage people to push their comfort zones a little bit and to participate in corporate worship?
Picking songs that are really accessible and easy-ish to sing. I waver back and forth sometimes with how easy a song has to be to sing, and there are the people that you can't have more than a 6-note range, and you can't do, and then you go to a U2 concert and it's nobody can hit the notes that Bono's hitting, but they're all singing the notes that Bono's singing,
trying. Yeah. They're trying, man.
But in general, where people are uncomfortable maybe and they don't know what's going on, finding stuff that is easy for them to latch onto. We repeat songs a lot. If we do a new song, we're usually going to do it again within the first 2 weeks after it, and we might not introduce another new song for a month after that, just so that people can, people are only going to sing what they know, and they're not going to sing along with something that they've heard once. And so it's fighting that inclination to do new stuff all the time, because for us as a team, by the time we've done the song once on a Sunday morning, we've done it 6 or 7 times, because we learned it in rehearsal, we ran through it before Sunday, and then we did it for 2 services. It's not a new song for us anymore, but because of the way that people attend church, it's there's going to be people 3 months down the road that's still a brand new song for them, because they just happened to show up on certain weeks where we were or weren't doing that song. So that's really important. We kind of talked already about the sort of volume environment, and volume and lighting and all that kind of stuff can help that. It's a very delicate thing to try to figure out how to make people who are uncomfortable with loud things comfortable, while also making people who are uncomfortable with their own voice comfortable. Now, I mentioned Matt Maher already. I've heard him say 2 or 3 times when he's been leading worship, and I've stolen the line from time to time when inviting people to worship. And we're all going to sing together. It doesn't matter if you have a great voice or a terrible voice. If you think you have a terrible voice, then just sing that much louder. It'll serve God right for giving you that voice in the first place. And so just making people feel comfortable. And I think also, I hate when worship leaders talk too much. I'm like, I don't want to listen to you preach a mini sermon every week. But if you can find moments where a song really means something to you and you can help people connect to you as you lead the song, then I think it helps make them more comfortable. I don't see myself as like a super eloquent speaker, so I tend to lots of times kind of err on the side of self-deprecating humor in between songs, which is, I think, kind of weird. I don't know that many other people sort of default to that, and I have to deal with like the fallback of that as, whatever kind of like self-deprecating thing I say about myself to try to connect with people. I'm going to be getting comments from people afterwards that think it's funny to bring it up every single week when they see me in the foyer. But if that helps people like sort of let their guard down, like heaven forbid, even laugh a little bit in the middle of a worship set, then that's awesome. That's part of why I'm here, is to get them to let their guard down a little. So I love to take a moment if it's appropriate to make people laugh in between songs, because it's just like kind of like, it can, like, reverence is great, but sometimes we can be so reverent that we kind of lose the relational aspect of things.
Laughter can be worship too.
Yes,
absolutely.
Do you have any other random pet peeves as a worship leader? I would love to hear them. Or any songs you really hate singing. I know that would be personal to you.
This is the section where we try to get Ryan in trouble.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I know you guys are going to try to get me in trouble. This isn't really so much a pet peeve, I guess. I feel like even among worship-oriented artists that market themselves as more stripped down, more accessible, there still tends to be a lot of like production and high-level musicianship in the music. And even at a church our size, which we're, I don't know what we are now post-COVID, 2 campuses, but, at our campus, we probably 700 to 900 people a weekend or something like that. Even at a church our size, like, we don't always have musicians that are of the level that you're going to pull that stuff off super accurately. And I've had people ask me, what do you think of this artist, a popular worship artist or whatever? And I'm like, I think that bits of their songs are really great for congregational use, and they could work really well as a tag on the end of a song. But some of their rhythms and melodies and stuff are not, they're not as accessible as maybe they're being marketed to be.
Right.
And so, I get excited when somebody like Matt Redman comes out with a new album, because people will rag on Matt Redman all day for being simple and basic, but like his lyrics are killer theologically and spoken from the heart. And like, dude knows like 4 chords on the guitar, and it's so much more accessible sometimes than some of the stuff that's like really cool. And and we've made some use of some backing tracks and stuff to make some of the other stuff a little more easy to pull off, and kind of helps flesh things out, and also giving musicians some flexibility to play it the way that they're comfortable playing it. But I guess that's always been kind of like not a pet peeve, but something that can be frustrating as a worship leader who's not, a mega church guy with a paid staff of musicians. I love that there is worship music out there with great artistry, but sometimes it can be tricky.
Yeah. How have you managed to recruit your team, find new musicians to participate?
We do twice a year. We do like a big volunteer push where, we put out word and we, set up the whole foyer with interest forms and all that kind of stuff. So we do that like twice a year, and we get a decent amount of people from that sometimes, not always. And so we always plan when we know that's coming, and we plan some, an evening of auditions where we'll be here for 3 or 4 hours auditioning people. Maybe equally as effective as that has been, the word of mouth of people inviting somebody else to audition, or somebody in conversation just mentions that they play guitar, instead of like letting that moment in conversation pass, like ask them what kind of guitar they play, or, you play in a band or whatever. There's a delicate balance between like recruiting people,
right,
and making and just making people feel welcome, because I think those are two different things, and they can affect the way that people settle into the team afterwards, And so, like, I would rather have like 1,000 middle of the road musicians who feel like really grateful for the opportunity to use their gift in some way, than to have like a whole bunch of like uber skilled musicians who feel like they were like recruited for what they can bring, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Like I hesitate to say that because I don't want to sound like a jerk, but it's like the heart that people come in with, and
it's huge,
and the mindset that they come in with as either a need or a servant. It makes a huge difference in the way, in what they bring to the team personally.
That's important for creative people to remain flexible. We value that here. I'm a creative person. I have a lot of creative people on my team, and we have to talk about it a lot, because it's easy to get set on our systems and the things we design and we love, and it's important to remain flexible too. Man, thanks so much. This has been very helpful.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
Yeah, we have one question that we end with every time. You want to pitch that one?
Sure. We just go through and share something that is saving our life right now.
Doesn't have to be
silly
spiritual.
or serious.
All right, I can go first. I talked to my wife about this question this morning because I saw the question and I thought I could go silly or I could go serious, and she was like, I think you should go with the second one. And so I'm going serious,
okay,
at risk of being too serious or being a downer or whatever. But when you have struggles, especially when you're in ministry, sometimes God can really use that on the other side of things. I think as somebody who's dealt with their fair share of mental health issues, I spent a lot of years longing to hear people in leadership be open and honest about theirs. And I felt like every time that I heard somebody talk about anxiety, it was a sermon about worry, which is not
the same.
That's not what somebody who is dealing with like a legitimate struggle needs to hear or is going to connect with. And so 2016, I think I was diagnosed with OCD, which is not what most of culture thinks OCD is. It's not about being neat and tidy. It can truly like infiltrate every piece of your life. It's doing those things, those compulsions, to ease the fact that your brain tends to place equal amounts of value on all things. So most people have crazy thoughts, but some of us give the same amount of value to those crazy thoughts that we give to every other thought. And it really it can drive you nuts. So I spent a long time talking to pastors and Christian counselors and people who, with all the best intentions, sometimes helped, but sometimes hurt more than they helped. And I kind of got to a point where I kind of had it managed on my own to an extent. And then like COVID hit, and then coming back out of COVID, I hit a point where it all came like back like a freight train. And I had for years and years and years said like, no, I don't want to do medication. I've done counselors and they didn't help. I'm going to push through this on my own. And then because of COVID, there are certain mental health issues that you really need people who are adequately trained to and equipped to deal with. And so I was able to reach out to some people who were specifically trained and equipped to deal with my form of, most people treat OCD as an anxiety disorder, which it is, but it's starting to be not as much classified as that, because they realize that, talking about your problems and digging deep doesn't work for people who their problem is that they dig too deep to begin with.
True.
And so I was able to start doing like Zoom sessions with people that I wouldn't have had access to before. I'm just going to say I was never at a point where I was like suicidal. So it's, when you're talking about mental health and saying this is what's saving my life right now, it's like,
Right.
but I will say opening myself up to medication and proper therapy has like completely changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kudos to you, man.
Yeah.
So
one is,
I'm actually not like, I'm not in therapy at this point. I have access to my therapist if I need it,
Right.
but it's kind of how like OCD therapy works, is you learn the tools and you learn how to use them on their own.
Yeah.
But yeah, like people who are like, I've heard so much bad stuff about medication or bad stuff about whatever, is like, now that, 6 years later or whatever, I'm just like, just give it a shot. If you're, like maybe it's not for you, but maybe it's changed my life. And it's also, I think, made me feel comfortable enough to be able to share that story with other people and hope that it encourages them on their journey. And it's amazing how many people God will put in your path that deal with the same stuff if you are willing to open up and share it honestly.
Yeah, kudos to you just for your transparency, and I think that's needed more from people like us in positions like us. I've talked openly about anxiety and my own panic attacks and therapy, and it's interesting. When you take those transparent moments, it gives other people permission to not hide. And we all know that when you hide that stuff, man, it gets scary and it's dangerous. And if anybody's listening, man, no matter where you're at, you have issues like mental health issues of any type, man, reach out to somebody. There's people to help. There's great help. The amount of good stuff that's come in my life from therapy this last year, it's just really a blessing. And the days of pastors standing on pulpits and acting like the brain is not part of a fallen body should be gone.
Amen.
And making people feel like they're not spiritual if they struggle with stuff or need counseling. Those things should be gone. I have no tolerance for that. If it was up to me, I would go around and remove those people from ministry if I could. Man, I just, and I'll say this. So this is what's saving me, man. Transparency. Like, I just love it. And that was such an encouragement to me. Thank you for doing that. Being with people who are transparent and talking about their own issues and their own things just gives me life every time.
I'm going to take it in a completely different direction. I'm sorry. I should have had a serious one. But mine is grocery pickup. So I have previously.
Love the grocery pickup.
So sorry, guys.
I love the grocery pickup.
So previously, I'm kind of like a control-ish person when it comes to groceries. I like to pick my own produce and whatnot, but I really don't enjoy the time aspect of going grocery shopping. I am an introvert. I don't like being around a lot of people. I just don't like it. So my schedule has changed in the past several months, and I just was having a really hard time finding the time to go grocery shopping. And so I finally broke down. I was like, hey, somebody else can pick my apples. It will all be fine. So and
it's all fine until you get a bag of mushy apples.
It's true. But then I've had somebody gave me brown basil and they gave me my money back and it was all fine. So you know what? You can give me brown basil. It's fine.
Well, and there's less likelihood of coming back with like 6 different types of Oreos.
It's great for
just
our
happen to walk
budget.
past them.
It's great for our budget, and it's great for it's saving my hiney right now with time management. So it's good.
It's the first time hiney has been said on the podcast. Somebody take note of that.
Oh man.
I'm the guy who my wife does not let me go into the grocery store to pick stuff up if I'm hungry, because I'm that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always hungry, so
I'll double the list.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much, Ryan, for being on here, man. I'm excited about this and this conversation. I know it's going to be so helpful to so many people. And thanks for listening to Church Chat, where we have conversations you wish you were having about ministry. We can't wait to be with you again in the future on this podcast. Just exciting stuff. God's doing amazing things. And we don't have a fancy way to say bye on here. We just got to say
Bye.
See you later.
stay classy, San Diego.
There you go. Hey. Nothing like a Ron Burgundy quote there.
Exactly.
The Church Chat podcast is for educational purposes only. We dive deep into important and sometimes sensitive conversations and topics about life in ministry. Please know that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely the views and the opinions of the guests and the hosts and do not necessarily represent the organizations that we work for. Nor should our views or opinions be considered a full perspective of circumstances that may be mentioned in this podcast. Our perspectives are limited, and so will be this podcast. What we hope to do is have conversations and spark greater conversations that will lead leaders and their organizations towards greater health. The Church Chat podcast is edited by Emily Gardner and produced by Emily Gardner and Josh Ott. The Church Chat podcast is supported by EFCA East, an Eastern district of the Evangelical Free Church of America covering 6 states. EFCA East helps leaders live well, lead well, and multiply, helping churches find new vitality and multiply transformational churches on the East Coast. The EFCA is multiplying transformational churches among all people. For more information, visit efcaeast.com. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and can't wait to see you on the next Church Chat episode.